A nun is a woman who vows to dedicate her life to religious service, typically living under vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience in the enclosure of a monastery. Although the idea is usually associated with Roman Catholicism, nuns exist in various other Christian denominations like the Eastern Orthodox, Anglican, and Lutheran, as well as other religions. In the Buddhist tradition, female monastics are known as bhikkhuni, and take several additional vows compared to male monastics. Nuns are most common in Mahayana Buddhism, but have more recently become more prevalent in other traditions. Though the terms are often used interchangeably, nuns historically take solemn vows and live a life of prayer and contemplation in a monastery or convent, while religious sisters take simple vows and live an active vocation of prayer and charitable works. In the Catholic tradition, there are many religious institutes of nuns and sisters, each with its own charism or special character. Traditionally, nuns are members of enclosed religious orders and take solemn religious vows, while sisters do not live in the papal enclosure and formally took vows called simple vows. As monastics, nuns living within an enclosure historically commit to recitation of the full liturgy of the hours throughout the day in church, usually in a solemn manner. They were formally distinguished within the monastic community as choir nuns, as opposed to lay sisters who performed upkeep of the monastery or errands outside the cloister. This last task is still often entrusted to women, called externs, who live in the monastery, but outside the enclosure. They were usually either oblates or members of the associated third order, often wearing a different habit or the standard woman's attire of the period. In general, when a woman enters a religious order or monastery, she first undergoes a period of testing the life for 6 months to 2 years called a postulancy. If she and the order determine that she may have a vocation to the life, she receives the habit of the order and undertakes the novitiate, a period of living the life of the religious institute without yet taking vows. Upon completion of this period, she may take her initial temporary vows. Temporary vows last 1 to 3 years, typically, and will be professed for not less than 3 years and not more than 6. Finally, she will petition to make her perpetual profession, taking permanent, solemn vows, in the branches of the Benedictine tradition, and conversion of life, cloistered nuns. They often undertake contemplative ministries, that is, a community of nuns is often associated with prayer for some particular good or supporting the missions of another order by prayer. Yet religious sisters can also perform this form of ministry. E.g., the Maracanal missionary sisters have small houses of contemplative sisters, some in mission locations, who pray for the work of the priests, brothers and other sisters of their congregation. And since Vatican II have added retreat work and spiritual guidance to their apostolate, the sister disciples of the Divine Master are also cloistered sisters who receive visitors and pray in support of their sister congregation. The Daughters of St. Paul in their media ministry. A canoness is a nun who corresponds to the male equivalent of canon, usually following the rule of S. Augustine. The origin and rules of monastic life are common to both. As with the canons, differences in the observance of rule gave rise to 2 types. The canoness regular, taking the traditional religious vows, and the secular canoness, who did not take vows and thus remained free to own property and leave to marry, should they choose. This was primarily a way of leading a pious life for the women of aristocratic families and generally disappeared in the modern age, except for the modern Lutheran convents of Germany. A nun who is elected to head her religious house is termed an abbess if the house is an abbey, a prioress if it is a monastery, or more generically may be referred to as Mother Superior, and styled Reverend Mother. The distinction between abbey and monastery has to do with the terms used by a particular order or by the level of independence of the religious house. Technically, a convent is any home of a community of sisters or, indeed, of priests and brothers, though this term is rarely used in the United States. The term monastery is often used by the Benedictine family to speak of the buildings in convent when referring to the community. Neither is gender specific. Convent is often used of the houses of certain other institutes, The traditional dress for women in religious communities consists of a tunic, which is tied around the waist with a cloth or leather belt. Over the tunic some nuns wear a scapular, which is a garment of long wide piece of woolen cloth worn over the shoulders with an opening for the head. Some wear a white wimple and a veil.